Every night around 11 p.m., a young black girl no older than 15 curled up on the same bench in Jefferson Park. She wore a faded gray hoodie with sleeves stretched at the cuffs and threadbare torn sneakers that had seen too many seasons. A weathered backpack, ducked, taped at the seams, never left her side, not even when she slept. Her name was Amara. Her skin, a rich ebony tone, bore the signs of the wind and sun: chapped lips, dry cheeks, but her eyes held something deeper. Not fear, not pity, but quiet defiance. The kind born from having to grow up too fast, from seeing too much and still choosing to carry on. She was small for her age, and from afar, people often mistook her for a child. Most nights, people walked past her without a second glance. Some wrinkled their noses. Others clutched their bags tighter. A few muttered that someone should call the police. No one stopped, no one asked, and no one really saw her. Amara had perfected the art of invisibility. In a city like Ridgeview, a sprawling metropolis glittering with wealth and drowning in contrast, being unseen was often safer than being acknowledged. Yet what no one knew, not the joggers, the dog walkers, or the cops who occasionally patrolled the park, was that Amara wasn't a runaway. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't using drugs or trying to scam anyone. She was a straight-A student who did her homework in the library every afternoon until it closed. She dreamed of being a neurosurgeon one day, like the woman in the book her mother used to read to her. Dr. Alexa Monroe, a pioneer in brain surgery who once lived on the same streets of Ridgeview. Amara kept that book in her backpack, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag to protect it from the rain. She had been living on the streets for 7 months now. 7 months since the accident that took her mother. 7 months since Child Services placed her in a group home where the staff didn't care and the older kids preyed on the younger ones. 7 months since she realized she was better off sleeping on a park bench than in a place where her safety was just another afterthought. The city shelters were always full. The social workers were always working on it. And the system, well, the system was too overloaded to notice another black girl slipping through the cracks. During the day, Amara blended in. She washed up in the public restroom near the basketball courts. She studied at the downtown library, sat in the back during lunch at school, and kept her head down. Teachers complimented her grades, praised her essays, and told her she had promise. None of them knew she was homeless. Amara made sure of that. She had rules: never ask for help, never draw attention, and never trust promises. She carried everything she owned in her bag, and her most valuable possession was a photo of her and her mother at the city fair. Cotton candy in hand, smiles bright. She had been 12 in that photo. Her mother had called her "My Little Storm" because she was small, loud, and unbreakable. Across town, in a penthouse that touched the clouds, Jackson Vance, 38, poured himself a glass of scotch. He stood at the window of his 3-story luxury apartment, watching the city lights sparkle like diamonds. He was a self-made millionaire, a tech entrepreneur who had built his first startup at 20 and sold it by 24. Since then, he'd launched 3 more companies, each more successful than the last. The world knew him as a genius. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. He drove a custom electric car, wore tailored Italian suits, and was featured on magazine covers. He had everything: money, women, influence, and yet behind the polished exterior, something inside him had long gone numb. Jackson had grown up in the foster system, abused, forgotten, shuffled from home to home until he aged out at 18. He told himself he'd never look back. Never feel sorry for anyone. If he could make it out, so could anyone. That was his mantra. That was the lie he told himself to stay angry enough to keep winning. His assistant, a well-groomed man named Derek, reminded him that morning of a scheduled publicity shoot for the new Vance Foundation, a scholarship program for underprivileged teens. Good optics, Derek had said. Jackson didn't care for charity, but he knew good PR when he saw it. The next afternoon, he stood in Jefferson Park, posing beside a freshly planted tree, flanked by smiling staff members and flashing cameras. It was all staged, all hollow. And then he saw her. A girl sitting on a bench not far from the commotion. She wasn't watching the cameras. She wasn't trying to get in the shot. She just sat there, elbows on her knees, chin in her hands, staring at nothing. Jackson squinted, trying to place her. Something about the way she sat. It wasn't lazy, it was composed. Like she was used to waiting. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't look away. He felt it, a spark of recognition. Not of her, but of something he'd buried long ago. Hunger, hardness, fire. He didn't like it. He scoffed, turned away, and walked back to the cameras. "Let's wrap this up," he muttered to Derek, who was still trying to adjust his tie. That night, back in his penthouse, Jackson couldn't shake her face. He'd seen thousands of homeless people over the years. Walked past them. Stepped over them. Blocked them on social media. But this girl, there was something different. She looked right at him like she could see through all the wealth, through the layers of steel and glass he'd wrapped around his soul. It unsettled him. Across the city, Amara pulled the hoodie over her head. As the wind picked up, she hugged her backpack tighter and lay on her side, facing the trees. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. The hunger was familiar, almost comforting. The loneliness, less so. As the stars emerged above the city skyline, two souls on opposite ends of life's spectrum lay awake. One on Egyptian cotton sheets, the other on a park bench, both thinking of the other. And neither of them yet knew how much that single glance would change everything. The night after the publicity shoot, Jackson Vance sat on the edge of his bed, still dressed in a cashmere sweater and slacks, unable to focus on the report. Derek had emailed him about the quarterly earnings. His mind kept returning to the image of the girl on the bench. He hadn't spoken to her, hadn't even acknowledged her presence during the shoot. But her stare, so grounded, so unapologetically bold, lingered like a thread pulling loose in the tightly woven fabric of his curated life. That kind of stare had weight. It wasn't desperate or pleading. It simply said, "I see you. Do you see me?" By midnight, he had thrown on a pair of jeans and a plain hoodie, no logos, no brand names, and taken the service elevator down to the underground garage. He drove himself, something he hadn't done in years. No driver, no security, just him and the electric hum of the car against the silence of night. He parked 2 blocks from Jefferson Park and walked the rest of the way, hands buried in his pockets, head down. He didn't know what he was doing or what he expected. Maybe she wouldn't be there. Maybe she was a hallucination, some ghost from his past mocking him. But she was there. Same bench, same backpack, same unreadable expression. She was reading, a battered paperback cradled in her hands under the dim flicker of a dying street lamp. Her hoodie was zipped up to her chin. Her sneakers were even worse than he remembered. She didn't look up when he approached, Not until he cleared his throat. Then, with slow deliberation, she closed the book and met his eyes. "You know it's not safe out here," he said. Her gaze didn't waver. "I know." Jackson waited. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken assumptions. "Where are your parents?" "Dead," she answered, flatly, with no embellishment. It was a knife to the gut, a word he knew too well. But he didn't flinch. "You in the system." "Was." "Didn't work out. Foster homes were hell. Group home was worse. I sleep here. It's safer." Jackson stared at her, unable to formulate a response. He expected a sob story, or anger, or even manipulation. But not this quiet strength, not this clarity. She stood, shouldering her backpack. "You rich, right? Nice boots. Fancy watch. You don't need to pretend you care. People like you never do." He glanced down. Damn, even in plain clothes he'd left traces of wealth. "Wet," he said. Amara paused. "Why?" He didn't have a good answer. Not one that made sense. "You remind me of someone." She tilted her head, unconvinced. "Let me guess. Yourself? Maybe," he admitted. "Then you should already know this story doesn't end well." And with that, she walked into the dark, her silhouette swallowed by shadows. Jackson stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, staring after her. The streetlight buzzed and flickered, then went out completely. The next morning, Jackson showed up at the office before anyone else. Derek found him at his desk, disheveled and distracted. "You look like hell," Derek said, half joking. "Thanks," Jackson muttered. "Listen, do we still fund that youth shelter downtown?" Derek blinked. Yeah, through the Vance Foundation. Want me to schedule a photo op? No cameras. No press. I want to go down there. Today. Derek raised an eyebrow but knew better than to ask questions. By noon, Jackson was touring the shelter, meeting with staff, asking about runaway teens, group homes, and system failures. No one mentioned Amara. No one had heard of her. That night, he returned to the park. She was there again, curled up, trying to shield herself from the cold. This time, he brought food. A plain paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a bottle of water. He left it on the bench without a word. "Don't expect a thank you," Amara said, eyes still closed. "I don't." "You're weird," she mumbled. "I get that a lot." The next 3 nights, he kept coming, never pushing, never prying. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes a book, once a blanket. She never asked for anything, and she never ran. On the 5th night, she finally spoke first. "Why do you keep coming back?" Jackson sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "I guess I'm trying to remember who I used to be." That guy must have been really broken. He was. Amara nodded. "Me too." The words hung in the air, raw and honest. She pulled out the book again. The same worn paperback. Jackson recognized it. "Alexa Monroe," he said. "Neurosurgeon. Used to live in Ridgeview." Amara's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "She was my mentor. Helped me get my first grant." Amara stared at him like he'd just said he'd walked on the moon. "You're lying." "I'm not. I was a punk kid in the foster system. She saw something in me. Took me under her wing. Changed everything." Amara looked down at the book. Her voice was quiet. "She's the reason I want to be a surgeon." Jackson swallowed hard. He felt something crack open. "Then let me help." She shook her head. "I don't take handouts." "It's not a handout, it's a chance." For the first time, her face softened. "Prove it." And in that moment, under the dim streetlight of Jefferson Park, the first thread of trust was sown between a millionaire and a girl who had nothing but her fire. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had just begun to change in ways neither could have predicted. Because sometimes the people we least expect become the ones who save us from ourselves. Jackson came back again. For 3 nights straight, he found himself walking the 6 blocks from his office tower to Lincoln Park. It made no sense. He had meetings, contracts, and a press interview lined up. But at 10:45 p.m., something stronger than reason pulled him back to that bench where Amara sat like a stone statue, alone in a world that never looked her in the eye. That first night, he brought food, a neatly packed brown bag from the organic cafe near his building. Turkey sandwich, apple, a bottle of water. When he offered it to her, she looked up, then away, her jaw tightening. "I'm not a stray," she said. Jackson hesitated, then placed the bag on the bench beside her. "I know you're not. I'll just leave this here, in case you change your mind." He walked away without looking back, but she did eat it. He knew because the bag was gone the next night. The second time he came, he didn't bring anything. Just stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, pretending he had nowhere else to be. She watched him from the corner of her eye, but said nothing. On the third night, she spoke. "Why are you here?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. She didn't ask him to leave, so he sat down, a few feet apart from her, letting silence stretch comfortably between them. "My name's Jackson," he said. "I know who you are." "Yeah, you built Vance Systems. You're worth like $500 million. You gave a speech at my school last year." That caught him off guard. "Didn't expect that. Didn't expect you to be here either." He chuckled, rubbing his hands together to keep warm. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said, "Amara." It became a rhythm. Night after night he came back. Sometimes he brought snacks, sometimes just himself. And slowly, like peeling layers from an onion, Amara shared pieces of her life. Her mother had been a nurse, working double shifts at Ridgeview General. Her father had died in prison when she was 7. Drug possession, then an altercation with another inmate. Her mom never spoke badly of him, just told Amara that love and mistakes often traveled together. 2 years ago, her mother died in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. Amara had been at school. The cops showed up during her science class. Everything blurred after that. No relatives, no guardians. Just the foster system. 2 homes in the first month. One had 3 other girls, and a foster mom who screamed more than she spoke. The second home had a lock on the outside of the bedroom door. Amara left in the middle of the night, took a city bus, and found herself at Lincoln Park because it felt safer. "I'm not homeless," she told Jackson one night. "I'm just in transition." He nodded. "Fair enough." She told him about school, how she aced every class, how she kept a toothbrush and deodorant in her backpack and washed up at the public library. She applied to colleges using the school computers. She never asked for help, and she never stayed in one place too long. "My mom used to say, 'You're not your circumstances, you're your choices.'" Jackson repeated the words in his head all the way home. One night, it rained. Hard. Jackson arrived soaked, holding a broken umbrella and carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. "She's not here tonight," he muttered to himself when he didn't see her on the bench. He scanned the park, heart tightening. Then he saw movement near the restrooms. A shadow. Her. She had just come out, pulling her hood over her head. "Hey," he called out. She looked up, startled. "You're gonna get pneumonia." I brought Coco. Don't people like you have drivers? Probably, he said, grinning, but they don't care about Coco. She took the cup with a soft thanks and sat down. I forgot my umbrella, she mumbled. You have anything dry in your bag? She shook her head. He hesitated, glancing at her soaked backpack. You can use my coat, at least for tonight. She blinked at him, surprised. Why are you being nice to me? I guess I see myself in you. She looked at him like he was crazy. You live in a skyscraper. Yeah, but I started in a basement apartment with mice in the walls and a stepdad who thought kindness was a weakness. Amara didn't say anything, but her expression softened. Later that night, while she used the restroom again, Jackson sat alone on the bench. The backpack, soaked and sagging, had been left behind. He knew it was a breach of trust. He knew he shouldn't. But concern overpowered caution. He unzipped it gently. Inside, everything was neatly packed and wrapped in plastic bags. Textbooks, worn notebooks with precise handwriting, a small toiletries pouch, a nearly empty granola bar wrapper. Then he saw a folder labeled college stuff. Inside were school assignments, all marked with perfect grades. College applications filled out in her careful script, a crumpled draft of a scholarship essay. He smoothed it out and read it. It wasn't just good. It was raw and brilliant. She wrote about being invisible in a world that didn't care. About choosing to rise anyway. She quoted her mother. She wrote, I'm not asking for pity, I'm asking for a chance. I want to heal people the way my mother did, with knowledge, compassion, and courage. Not because I think I'm special, but because I believe I still can be. Then he saw a photo of her and her mother. Amara was about 10, holding a cotton candy in one hand and her mom's hand in the other. They were both laughing. And tucked inside a plastic sleeve was a folded letter. It read, to the woman I hope to become. Jackson opened it. Dear future me, I hope you remember the cold nights and empty bellies. I hope you remember what it feels like to be forgotten. Because if you forget, you might stop caring. And if you stop caring, you become just like them. I hope you still dream. I hope you still help. I hope you still believe that people can be good. Love me. He sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in his hands. When Amara returned and saw him crying silently, her expression turned to stone. You went through my stuff. I'm sorry, he whispered, wiping his face. But I'm glad I did. She grabbed the backpack and turned to walk away, shoulders tight, wounded pride in every step. Wet, he said, standing. Please. She stopped but didn't face him. You're brilliant and strong, and I want to help. Why? Because you remind me of the person I wanted to be before I got rich and started pretending I didn't care. The silence stretched. Then she said, I don't need saving. I know, but maybe you deserve support. She turned halfway toward him, eyes shining with defiance and something else. Hope, maybe. Then don't treat me like a project. Just be real. He nodded. Deal. And so, on that rain-soaked night in Lincoln Park, under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, something shifted. A girl with a backpack full of dreams and a man with a past full of regret found common ground. Not in charity, but in truth. In the kind of connection that doesn't need fixing, only listening. And neither of them knew it yet, but their story was only just beginning. Morning sunlight spilled across the skyline like melted gold, stretching its fingers into Jefferson Park and warming the stone bench that had served as Amara's home for 7 long, soul-testing months. But this morning, the bench was empty. For the first time in nearly a year, Amara wasn't there because her world had changed. Just 3 weeks earlier, she'd still been curled beneath that park light, backpack beneath her head, the wind her only blanket. She had still been the girl no one saw, until Jackson Vance did. That moment, small and quiet as it was, had split her life in two before the look and after the look. Jackson hadn't gone back to his penthouse that night feeling like a millionaire. He'd gone home feeling like a fraud. He hadn't slept. Instead, he paced his sprawling glass apartment, haunted by her stare, the unflinching, unashamed gaze of a child who had already seen the worst and learned to stand anyway. He thought of how many versions of her had existed in his own past, boys and girls just like her, left to the wolves, to the silence, to a system that never looked back. He'd always told himself they were statistics, that their fates weren't his fault. But now that excuse felt cowardly. The next morning, dressed in dark jeans and a hoodie instead of his usual tailored armor, Jackson walked into a coffee shop near his headquarters and waited until his foundation's director arrived. The man looked surprised to see Jackson without his usual entourage or ladder already in hand. "I need a name," Jackson said without greeting. The director blinked. "A name. The girl on the bench. Jefferson Park. I want her name, and I want to help her." The man hesitated. "Would need consent, paperwork." "Find a way," Jackson said quietly. "Do it quietly. She can't know it's coming from me." And he did. That same afternoon, through a friend at the Ridgeview School District, the name Amara Bell was quietly obtained. She had no listed guardians, no permanent address, just a school file with near-perfect grades and a note, possibly transient. Monitor. Within days, Jackson had arranged for a private investigator, someone ethical and discreet, to ensure she wasn't in immediate danger. The man reported back with a chilling clarity. Amara had survived on wits and silence. No drugs, no records, just resilience. She reads medical journals in the library, the investigator said. She's trying to teach herself pre-med curriculum. That night, Jackson sat alone in his penthouse, that familiar emptiness pressing into him from all sides. He poured himself a drink. Then he set it down. And for the first time in a long time, he cried, not out of pity for Amara, but out of shame. For all the wealth he had acquired, the power he wielded, he had never been as strong as that girl with the duct-taped backpack and the quiet, defiant eyes. He made another call. By the end of the week, Amara was called into the counselor's office at school. Her stomach twisted as she walked down the hall. Had she done something wrong? Did someone find out she was homeless? But instead of being met with accusations, she found a soft-eyed woman with a gentle smile. "Amara, we have something to offer you." She listened, jaw clenched, as the woman explained a scholarship, full academic ride, housing, food safety. "Why?" she asked, arms crossed. The woman smiled again. "Because you deserve it, and someone saw that." Amara's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's always a catch." "No catch. Just a new chance." She didn't say yes immediately. It took her 3 days. 3 nights of sleeping under stars, hearing distant sirens, jumping at every loud step. 3 mornings of washing her face in public sinks and studying for algebra quizzes in a cold library corner. On the third morning, she looked at her reflection and said aloud, "I think it's okay to want more." And just like that, she said yes. The new school was nothing like her old one. The halls were wide, lined with artwork and quotes from philosophers and scientists. The dorm was warm, with soft beds and soft lights, and a roommate named Lila, who had a pink lava lamp and a dog named Snoopy she missed every day. At first, Amara stayed quiet. She didn't know how to exist without watching her back, but the teachers welcomed her like she belonged. The counselor checked in regularly. Leela let her borrow her headphones. In class, she thrived. She wasn't just smart, she was hungry to learn. She joined the robotics team, the science club, and started a tutoring program for students struggling in biology. She spent her weekends in the library, devouring books on neuroscience, annotating every page of Gray's Anatomy with color-coded tabs. What she didn't know, what no one told her, was that behind it all, Jackson was still watching, not in a creepy or controlling way. He kept his distance, kept his name off the paperwork. But every late-night email from the counselor, he got copied. Every grade report, he read. Every doctor's appointment, every meal plan, every therapy session. He funded it all. He never showed up at the school. Until one afternoon, it was raining. The kind of spring rain that left the streets glistening. Amara was sitting in the student lounge, reading under a skylight when the headmaster walked in with a guest. She looked up and blinked. It was him. The man from the park, the one who'd seen her. Their eyes met. She stood slowly, unsure. "Why are you here?" He didn't try to explain it with a speech. No rehearsed lines. No rich man wisdom. Instead, he said, "I wanted to see how you were doing. That's all." She studied him. "It was you, wasn't it? The scholarship. The place." He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. She folded her arms. "Why?" He looked at her with a softness he didn't know he was capable of. "Because someone once told me I was worthless. And I believed them. For a long time. Then I saw you. On that bench. And you looked back like you already knew you weren't. Like you knew the world was wrong, not you. And it made me realize how many people the world lies to." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "I don't want pity." He nodded. "Good, I don't want to give it." "Then what do you want?" He paused. "Maybe just to make it a little easier for someone else. Because I remember what it's like to survive and call it living." She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. "You still think you can fix everything with money?" she asked. "No," he said. "But maybe I can build bridges. And then get out of the way." That made her smile, a real one. For the first time in front of him, weeks passed. Amara grew bolder. She asked questions, challenged teachers, led a project on neuroplasticity that won first place at the regional science fair. When she spoke, people listened. Not because she was loud, but because she was clear about who she was, what she had lived through, and where she was going. Jackson attended that science fair. He sat in the back, no cameras, no press, just a man in a worn hoodie watching a girl take the mic and change the air in the room. That night, Amara found him sitting on a bench outside the auditorium. "Funny," she said. "You keep ending up on benches," he chuckled. "Maybe I'm trying to understand what it felt like." She sat beside him, her book in hand. "You know," she said, "you never asked what I want to do with all this." I assumed medicine. She nodded. But not just surgery. I want to create programs for girls like me. I want to change the system. Be the person I needed. You already are, he said softly. She looked at him. Why don't you take credit for what you did? Because I didn't save you, Amara. You saved yourself. I just gave you space to stand. She didn't argue. She just opened her book and started reading. And for a long time they sat there. No titles, no pasts. Just two people who had once been broken, now learning to be whole. Today, the bench in Jefferson Park is still there. It's been cleaned, polished. A small plaque sits at its base, donated anonymously. It reads, "For the ones who waited, for the ones who rose anyway." Amara visits it sometimes, not to sleep, but to remember. To read, to breathe, to see how far she's come, and sometimes Jackson joins her. No suit, no headlines. Just a man and a girl, both changed by a glance across a park and the quiet decision to be more. To give more. To see what the world tried so hard to ignore. And in that choice, on that bench no more, the world became just a little bit better.